energies definitely have a central bank, if you want to think about it, and that's OPEC. Now, a lot like other central banks, they can have momentary, temporary, but impactful influence over the price. Even when the Bank of Japan tries to intervene with the yen, they only can affect movement for a couple sessions, right? So I'm not going to look at the central bank affecting the yen or the central bank affecting the NASDAQ any different than I look at OPEC as sort of a central bank, OPEC and OPEC Plus, affecting crude, RBOB, and heating oil. Now, one of the things that we've been talking about is the possibility that this downtrend could start, number one, finding support just from a price perspective at the $50 area. That's number one. With OPEC Plus, meaning Russia meeting today, do we start to get word that Russia is willing to play along and join the production cuts? I believe the only reason we haven't seen the OPEC meeting move up from the March date to sometime in February is Russia's holding out. Remember, Russia's importing plenty of crude to the U.S. and other countries ever since the Venezuelan embargo. So they're not really hurting for customers, and they're not really hurting from a price perspective either. While the Saudis would like to see crude at 80, the Russians are fine with it at 40. So $50 a barrel means something very different to OPEC than it does OPEC Plus. Okay? The other thing is that the pattern that we've been talking about in crude would then validate, and it's that pattern right in here, that would validate then my also getting long RBOB, the RB. So if crude starts moving higher, then I might start looking for opportunities to get long RBOB. Now, this is not the same pattern. The pattern must start with that new low, which is here. Then we'll look for a high to pull back. And then we'll look for some support. And then we'll look for this high to get taken out if this indeed ends up being the high. And then at that point, we would look for this as the breach or the breakout. And then preferably see some sort of retracement to get long with options in RBOB or even get long RBOB itself. But we do have some interesting bottoming action happening. What about heating oil? Heating oil looks a little bit more like crude. Same idea. I've got my low. I've got my... And really, technically, crude has, you can say, broken out. Not crude, sorry, heating oil has broken out in front of the CL contract. So HO has broken out. This is very subtle, but that's the confirmation. Did we make a higher high than this resistance right there? And I believe we have. So what we'll be looking for is perhaps a little bit more strength and then the market to pull back, giving us perhaps a really nice opportunity. I'd keep an eye on this point of control waiting down here at around 64.35. That would be a terrific breach, point of control retest, and that's going to give us the opportunity to get potentially long. But this is sort of preceding crude, but it's a really interesting little pattern. And one thing we'll do here and later on is take a look at some of the seasonal tendencies that may be accompanying perhaps this production cut conversation that could happen if Russia wants to go along in energies and then create these really finally solidify and trigger these breakouts that we need to start giving us a reason to be bullish before we get an uptrend, before we get green grab candles. So this is being a little, really looking a little bit more at the distribution market that's starting to form here. It sure is trying, and a potential OPEC-led, central bank-led, if you want to think of them that way, I do, trigger, breakout in specifically these three markets. So we'll transition to that seasonal talk in just a bit, but keep that in mind in terms of what we're looking at and how OPEC can be the trigger.